talk about like how it's kind of impacting you guys, and then we can move into talking about the conspiracies around it and how we would use epistemology to get to that, get through that.
Okay.
Okay. I'm live on YouTube. So, and now I'm hearing myself. So just bear with me, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm gonna turn the light off behind me. 1 second.
Okay. So, why don't you guys introduce yourself? Let's start out with Nathan.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a new YouTuber. I suppose I have posted my first street epistemology video probably back in September of 2019. I did a bunch of SE at Burning Man.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
Yeah, a lot of it at Burning Man. I figured it was a great place for it because it's a lot of people are open to new experiences, open to being challenged, open to talking to strangers. So the environment is just perfect for street epistemology. And it allowed me to practice, and I recorded myself. Unfortunately, the audio is horrible in most of it because I was still new at creating content for it. But it allowed me to listen back to myself, to listen to my own bias, and to see why certain methods of listening and communication were not so effective. And so I can improve my listening and my questioning. And then it wasn't until I started practicing SE in the car, driving for Uber and Lyft, that I started really getting good at it because I was doing it every single day. And then after I practiced a lot there, I decided I wanted to sit down with my friends to do long form discussions with friends and family members. And so that's what I'm working on right now, is doing friends and family members long form SE interviews. And I just posted my most recent video, I think yesterday, or maybe the day before yesterday, very, very recently. But all this coronavirus news has just kind of sucked the air out of the room for my video, right? Even though it's the best video I've ever made. But it's just going to take some time for people to, when they're in quarantine, maybe they'll sit and watch it. But there's too many other things in the headlines right now to be gravitating too much attention to it. But I'll just give it some time and keep at it. And so that's, and the name of my channel is Abstract Activist SE. Yeah.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, Eddie. Yeah, Eddie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into SE?
I think, like most people, I came across Anthony Maglabosco's videos, and I decided, you know what, like, I think I could do this. It was a gradual thing. First, I'm just very, very intrigued, loved watching the videos, and then eventually I started to get to the point where I can think of the next question that he might ask before he asks it. And then I realized that I could probably do this myself. And so I, convinced my wife to buy a GoPro and got out there. And honestly, once you start doing it, it's very addicting. It's one of those things where even if you aren't very good at it, you just want to get better and you want to keep doing it. And so I've been doing it for 3 years. I have lots of videos that I put up over the years. I'm not as active currently, but I'm still putting out content.
Okay. So can you guys just explain what street epistemology is?
Yeah, sure. So street epistemology is an approach to have a conversation with someone about any topic. It's a Socratic approach, meaning you're asking a bunch of questions, so it kind of feels like an interview, but it doesn't necessarily have to be an interview. But it's you're helping someone examine their epistemology. And what I mean by that is you're helping people figure out how they got to their conclusions. And then from there, once you've identified how they've come to a certain conclusion, asking questions very gently challenging how they could be so sure. And the idea is to give them, the idea is to either confirm or give them pause on the reliability of the method they use to reach their conclusion. So if they're using a method that's not necessarily very reliable, like feelings or something of that sort, is to help them realize that it isn't reliable by asking certain questions. So you never really want to tell them. You kind of want them to do the work.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the beauty of it. It's not confrontational. And that's kind of the basis of it. Yeah.
Okay, so Nathan, you're kind of new to street epistemology. Why do you think that?
Well, I'm new to putting it on the internet.
Okay, so what made you? But you're not new to doing it. You've been doing it for a while.
I've been doing it for probably like 2.5 years, just like off camera.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to make my friends feel weird, but I did it everywhere because I feel like there are unsubstantiated beliefs everywhere. Or beliefs that have yet to be fully justified, and a lot of people haven't come to terms with that. And to me, I think my favorite way to describe SE, and I think there's many different interpretations and ways to put it, but I think my favorite way to put it is we're often trying to bring other people to our understanding about whatever it is that we think is true, whether that be online or in person, and we're telling each other facts that we think we hold that are true in the case. And hey, let me tell you why you ought to believe this. But to me, SE is kind of the opposite of that. It's the opposite of preaching. To me, it's bringing myself to someone else's understanding with questions. What questions could I ask that would make me believe that other person if my questions had satisfying answers to them? So I would be asking questions that if I had an adequate answer, that led down a road to another adequate answer and another one, that I would eventually come to believe them. And if they struggle to do that, because there is no adequate way to answer the questions, then they will look into the emptiness of their own understanding. And generally they'll let go of it. Or they'll have great reasons to be saying what they're saying. And then I will be convinced, and I'll walk away with better reasoning about that thing. Right. And the whole, kind of like the tagline of my channel is be the open mind you wish to encounter. So be that person you wish they would be, that would be open and listening to your reasoning. And to me, that's street epistemology in a nutshell. Did that answer your question? I'm not sure if that was your original question.
No, that's a great answer to the question. So, so the idea isn't necessarily a lot of people, I think, when they talk to atheists or non-believers, or, I mean, there's street epistemologist believers, essentially. I've seen that on YouTube as well. But when people talk to non-believers, oftentimes they think that the goal of the conversation is to try to attack a lot of time, right? So I've noticed with street epistemology that it's never like, you're never trying to put your belief even out there, like Anthony, or I'm sure if you guys have been doing it for a while, the goal is to kind of start at the null hypothesis and then just ask them the question. And I like how Anthony a lot of times he'll say, I'm not putting my belief out there at all. I'm just, if you want to ask me what it is at the end of it, you can, but I just want to know what your belief is. And so that's kind of like the difference that I see with it as well. So
yeah, I like that. Okay, go ahead.
You go ahead.
Okay. I I like the idea of being open to answering questions in the same way that I want them to being open to answering my questions. So I always try to end the talk with what any questions for me, but generally people are so wrapped up in their own belief system after an SE talk that they have a hard time asking questions. They might ask me where I stand on the issue, in which case I can tell them, but I try to save it for the end so that that null hypothesis kind of stance can be demonstrated in the beginning, because we want to be open to being wrong, because we would want our interlocutor, the person that we're having a conversation with, to also be open to being wrong themselves. Mm-hmm. And so in that sense, that's why it's not really, you can be a street epistemologist and believe in all sorts of stuff. Right. That is just a matter of our approach to one another, and yeah.
Okay, so with the coronavirus being such a hot topic right now, I thought that we could talk a little bit about that. And let's just pretend that I am a conspiracy theorist and you guys are going to use street epistemology on me. All right. So let's start with Eddie. Eddie, I'm a conspiracy theorist. You find me on the street. Let's start from the beginning.
Okay. So I think the best way to start it is for you to pitch like whatever your conspiracy is.
Okay. So personally, I think that coronavirus was a hoax perpetrated by the crazy Democrats to take out my election. And I think that the way that they made the virus was by using 5G cell phone signals.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that you think that the virus is a hoax posed by the Democrats. And what did you say about the 5G?
The 5G cell phone towers are clearly the thing that is infiltrating the cells, acting as the virus. So it's not actually a virus. It's just the 5G cell phone signals mutating the cells and making it attack the body.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So
it's really hard being on this end of it. I hope nobody tunes in right now thinking that's but anyways, yeah.
So how usually with conspiracy theorists, they're very confident. But the next thing I would ask would be, how confident are you that this is the case?
So if it was on a scale from a 1 to 10, I'd say a 15.
Wow. Okay. So you're pretty certain.
I know 100%.
So how would we tell the difference between a cell that's been mutated from a cell tower and a cell that's been mutated by other means?
Well, that's the thing about 5G cell phone signals is it makes it look exactly as if a virus overtook the cell. So it'd be really hard to tell the difference.
So if we can't tell the difference, should we, is it possible that it isn't mutated by a tower?
Well, no, because they've been putting 5G cell phone towers all over the country.
So if, is there somewhere cells that have been mutated without 5G cell towers?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I guess the flu virus might have been, because I don't think they had 5G when the flu came around.
So has there been any cells that have been mutated even after 5G towers have been around?
Well, yeah, the coronavirus.
Okay, so
no, I'm aside from
that, like with the towers being here,
yeah,
can cells still mutate by themselves?
Well, I believe that they can do just about anything with 5G. I think that they can not only mutate cells but create cancer. So I guess that's a cell mutation. But they can also override brain neural activity and make people do stupid things.
So how do we tell the difference between the tower doing something to cells and it naturally happening?
I don't know. You'd have to ask them.
Would you be satisfied they gave an answer?
Well, I mean, I don't really trust them because lizards aren't trustworthy, but
Okay. So do you have any way to know that what you believe is actually wrong when it comes to a specific cell being mutated by 5G towers?
um, I no, I don't, I guess.
Thanks for the chat.
so yeah, so that was a pretty good I mean, because at the core of it, there's really not much more that someone can say outside of that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to put myself in that mind state,
Yeah.
obviously, but that is a lot of the hollowness of some of these theories. And so Nathan, how would you approach like it, because you're part of the burning community, and so they love
Yeah,
conspiracies.
definitely.
So what are some conspiracy theories that you've heard, and how have you dealt with them? Have you tried at all, or
Oh yeah. I had a sit down. Sometimes I just do it at different various festivals. So there's a local version of Burning Man that happens once a year, probably canceled this year, called
fire?
Soak,
Oh,
which is yeah, each state is going to have their own version
yeah.
of local burn. This one is called Soak in Oregon, and last year somebody sat down and wanted to talk to me about chemtrails. And you do what, why, how, right? And so first I got clear with what it was, and then why it would be happening and why people would be doing it. And then I asked how we could know it's true. And by the time we got to how we could know it's true, the reasons I were giving were relatively anecdotal. From this one guy, that he heard the story of this guy who worked on these airplanes, and working on these airplanes, this guy was certain that he knew. So it's basically secondhand information from this guy who worked on the airplanes, right? And sometimes you just some abstract reasoning is good to just kind of be like, well, if I could deprive you of this reason, where would your confidence be on the scale? First, I get their confidence somewhere, some number, and it's usually 90 or 100. And then I say, if we deprived you of this one guy who told you this one thing, where would you slide down to? And then we kind of like filled in that space. We just talked about that for quite some time, and I gave him plenty of time to think about it. And he realized that he probably wouldn't have any confidence if he were deprived of that one reason. And then I just questioned the reliability of that reason. Could this guy not be knowing what he's talking about? Is it possible that this guy who thinks that there's chemtrails is mistaken, and that you're believing a person who's mistaken? Is it possible that we want to know things that are interesting to us or sound interesting to us? Can you think of another person out there who believes in something that's just as outstanding as this claim because they think it's interesting? And sometimes people will notice this without having to talk about any facts, without having to get in the nitty-gritty of anything specific. When it comes to the coronavirus and cell phone towers, sometimes you don't need to even question their epistemology very much at all. You could just say, if the epidemiologists were to say that the source of this virus is from some other means, and they were all in agreement, and if you were to build your confidence based on that, would you change your mind that it's not cell phone towers that's causing the virus, that caused the virus in the first place? And sometimes people will just say, yeah, I would listen to the experts, because they haven't listened to the experts in the first place. And so you could just say, okay, well, I think maybe that's what they're saying. you know, and they'll just change their confidence with that. But if they're pushing because they're 100% like really, really convinced, that's when you would go deeper into the epistemology and question whether or not they're comfortable believing in a thing, being at a high number on the scale of confidence about something, anything, without knowing what it would take to change their mind about it. And if they don't know what it would take to change their mind about it, then you can open their eyes to the fact that they might be closed-minded to this idea, to thinking that it's true and not knowing how to question it whatsoever. And then you can talk about other people who are in that same position about a whole host of other things and whether or not we are comfortable with them being in that predicament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's, in my opinion, it's so natural to want to have an answer that is more directed by agency, because when we look at the world and things that are bad just happen by happenstance, it creates a lot of confusion, you know, and insecurity, like you don't feel secure. And the result of that is always a sick feeling, you know. But if you can like clean it all up and make it all fit into a little box that makes sense, well, then you have the agent, the person that's responsible for it. You know, you have it all like makes sense as to why it happened. And the cool thing about conspiracies is that, like, I mean, you can go, you know, are you guys familiar with Mick West at all? He's a debunker. He wrote a book.
No.
He wrote a really cool book, and it's called Escaping the Rabbit Hole. And it's in the book he talks about like the spectrum of conspiracy theories. And so there's all the way to one side, there's like you know, flat earth, and then on the other side there's chemtrails. And so chemtrails is kind of like, you know, entry level conspiracy theorist. But that's the one that starts like, okay, the government's poisoning us, what else are they doing? And then you move down the line and you can end up at flat earth, which is, you know, the entire universe is a hoax and they're doing this to try to confuse us or whatever. So have you, Nathan, have you noticed a lot of flat earther resurgence in the festivals community?
I haven't actually had an SE talk on flat earth yet. I'm waiting for the day that happens. I usually, during a long form interview, I like to get some ideas down on a scale of confidence. I like to get a whole host of different ideas on the scale, so that way we are familiar with the scale before I challenge some deeply held belief. And I like to get a couple of ideas down that they do not think is true, that they would be a 1 or a 2 on the scale, so that I can then contrast that with something that they do think is true. And oftentimes people will select flat earth as the thing that they do not think is the case.
Okay.
And so that's how I generally, it's helpful in analyzing someone's thought process. However, I'm definitely open to talking to a flat earther. Just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I have, before I really knew about street epistemology, I've had a few friends that have gotten into it pretty hardcore, and I've had the frustrating conversations with them and not the street epistemology conversations with them. You know what I mean?
About flat earth?
Oh yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, you know who Andrew Jones is? The artist Andrew Jones? Have you ever heard? No? He makes like really cool fractal art, Android Jones.
Okay. Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah.
He does like the theater. It was he did like
stuff with
an
Tipper
hour-long movie.
Yeah.
Right. He did an hour-long movie at the Burn, I think, right?
Yeah,
Did you see that?
Yeah, and he like made an art car with the projector on it. Anyways,
that guy.
Yeah, so
it was a Tesla, right?
I don't know if it was a Tesla, but he is a flat earther. And you know, I mean, it just goes to show you that really intelligent people can be flat. Really intelligent people can believe bad things, you know what I mean? And
There are all sorts of reasons why people hold on to beliefs besides intelligence. And it's either comfort, or it could be comfort, it could be, oftentimes that's comfort is the thing that comes up.
Right.
Or maybe it's just it's interesting, or maybe they.
I think that is a huge. I think that's a huge part of it too. So Eddie, did you grow up in a Christian household or anything like that? What got you into SC?
Well, my household is very, very unique, and that's a whole another podcast. But I grew up Mormon. Yeah. And but I would say, like, I never truly believed anything that I was being told. It wasn't like a situation where I was being pressured to go on missions or anything like that, but I was definitely, like, really deep into the Mormon culture, to the point where my family was a little too crazy to be accepted into the Mormon church, if that makes anything. That gives you a picture. But honestly, I've always been a skeptical person, kind of indifferent emotionally, but also, like, analytical. So the religion and all that stuff just didn't make sense to me. And so eventually I found my way to atheist videos online, and then I got sucked into that. And then from there I found Anthony. So I used to be kind of like a firebrand type atheist, and I still kind of can be if I want to, but I usually prefer SE.
That's it's definitely the way to go. I mean, it doesn't ruin relationships. The other way can certainly go that direction.
I wanted to kind of swing back to one of what Nathan was talking about asking, if this wasn't the case, if I could take this reason away from you, what would that do to your confidence? I kind of want to add on to that the reason why we ask those type of questions is because we want to understand what is the foundational reason of why you believe this. What is the real reason? Because a lot of times people will say, I believe because of this reason, and then you simply have to just ask, well, if you didn't have that reason, or if this reason was no longer the case, would you drop in confidence? And if they say no, then there's no point in talking about that belief at all, or I mean that reason, and then you move on to the next one. And so it's basically trying to be efficient in understanding really why people believe whatever they believe. And I came up with a little analogy that helps people understand why I asked that. Because if you tell someone, if this wasn't true, would you still believe, or would you still be just as confident? They tend to get a little more defensive because they expect you to go, well, I'm going to show you how this is actually wrong. But really, it's it's a more innocent question. It's actually just wanting to know what is the real reason that's contributing to the confidence of this belief. And so I came up with an analogy. It's called jambalaya. Have you guys ever had jambalaya?
Negative, Ghost Rider.
Been a long time.
No. Okay, so jambalaya has a lot of ingredients, and it's known for being a spicy dish. And so the way I explain it to people is that if I wanted jambalaya and I wanted to figure out what was making it spicy, and I went to the chef and I said, "Hey chef, what is about this dish that makes it spicy?" And he told me it's the bell peppers. And I go, "Okay, so if I took the bell peppers out, would it be less spicy?" And he would say, "No, it'll still be pretty spicy." I would probably say, well, okay, then it's probably not the bell peppers. What is it about this dish that is making it spicy, so I can figure out how to make it less spicy for myself? And so it gives them an understanding of why I'm asking certain questions. I'm not saying bell peppers aren't a part of the dish. I'm saying I'm trying to identify what is it that's contributing to your confidence. And so when I present it that way, they understand I'm just trying to identify the foundational reason, not necessarily like attack it. I'm just trying to be efficient.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. So do you do SE in like Anthony does, where it's kind of like in parks, or where do you most often do your SE at?
Yeah, I actually go to a local park. It's cool because the park is not just a park, but it's actually a trail. And so a lot of people are running by, and so I get a lot of foot traffic. But depending on the time of day, some people may not stop because they got their headphones in and they're just running. So, but yeah, that's where I do it.
Yeah. What about you, Nathan? Do you mostly do it at festivals, and how do you get people to sit down with you to talk about these things?
I try to do it every opportunity I can, everywhere I go with everyone, just about with everything. There are certain times where I just let things slide because you got to have fun with life and not take it too seriously. But if I hear something and I think life would be better for everyone, if it would be important to know it, then I want to know it too. But also, if it would be important for them to not believe it if it were false, then I also want to engage in SE with them, provided they're consenting to do it. And it's with my friends and my family and with anyone all the time. I'd say most of the time it happens. It's usually either at cocktail parties or when some friends are over and they're saying something I just don't understand. Or if somebody wants to do a long form SE interview about a whole host of ideas. Recently, I've been challenging a whole host of beliefs all simultaneously, and that involves a survey that hits 24 points of epistemology while also getting many different beliefs all down, where I can understand their entire worldview. And that generally stretches out for, usually it can go anywhere between 2 hours to 3 hours, sometimes multiple sessions. And my most recent interlocutor, Abram, did 5 sessions, 2 hours each. And he went through some major changes. And I only have 2 of those videos up, and I'll have the next 3 of them up as time goes on. We'll see how much time I'll have with coronavirus. But just basically people generally are interested. If I get them interested, if I'm transparent about what I'm doing, if I'm like fully transparent, like this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to challenge you with questions. I'm going to try to charitably understand you. I'm going to try to not misrepresent you. And I'm going to repeat what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah. We lost your audio. We lost your audio.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Hang on. Let me just. We lost your audio, Nathan. I'm gonna just chat him, just in case you can't.
Sounds like you might hear us. Can you hear us? Thumbs up. No. Maybe it's just his headphones died.
Yeah. So, while we're waiting on Nathan, I was wondering, do you have any deeply held beliefs that you feel like, might be something that you could use street epistemology on yourself with? Like, do you believe anything that you find to be rational?
Well, there's definitely beliefs that once I discovered SE that I find myself thinking about and questioning, and being less certain, because I think one of the things that you learn when you do SE is you kind of lose your appetite for certainty, because you realize you can't really be certain about anything. And so you start revisiting. I mean, generally you're less certain about a lot of things, and then you might revisit something that you feel very, very passionate about or something like that. So like for me, I grew up in San Diego and then moved to Tyler, Texas. And one of the things that I had a strong opinion on was guns. And I found myself kind of being more sympathetic, to gun ownership and the other side of the argument. And it's probably simply because I'm in Texas, not in California anymore. And I'm meeting, people that are, really good people that own guns and have a different understanding and different position than I do. And so I started to ask myself, well, if have just switched from California to Texas, and my confidence level has gone down on it. Is it just geographical? And did I just believe it because it was convenient and I wasn't challenged in California? And so in that sense, I was less extreme about it. I no longer think that, removing all guns is probably a good idea.
Yeah. So, are you a gun owner at all now, or do you still not own a gun?
I don't own a gun now, but I'm not necessarily opposed to it either.
Okay.
I understand some of the safety concerns since I have kids. I understand that there's concerns if anyone that has access to the gun that might not be doing well mentally, it could pose a threat. But I can't necessarily rule out the possibility that it would be useful in some certain situations.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, when you were going through your gun ownership evolution or gun approval evolution, I guess, I don't know what you call it, but what was that like for you to experience your mind start to change on these different beliefs?
I think the first step was no longer necessarily arguing with other people. It was more like, okay, before I say this, how could I be wrong about this? Is this a good reason? And so there was this process of, instead of like, all right, here's the two teams, I'm on this team, let's just go after them, and any argument they have, I'll have an answer for, yada yada, back and forth. Now it was more of like an internal dialogue of, okay, is this a good reason? Can I rebut this reason? And look how my printer's going. And so I think the thing about SE is you start to actually internalize the questions and no longer certain about things. And so when you are engaging with someone else that's not you, there's a blind side, and you don't necessarily think about what you're saying. You're more think about what they're saying and how to combat it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So what about you, Nathan? I don't know if you heard me because your mic wasn't working, but
yeah.
What I was
Hopefully,
asking.
am I back? By the
Yeah,
way?
you're back. You're back. I
Okay,
can hear
good.
you come in. So
Cool.
what I was just asking Eddie was, is there any deeply held beliefs that you have currently that you think could use some epistemology on, or do you? I mean, that's such a nobody really thinks they do. I thought about it for a while today preparing for this conversation, but so do you think that there's anything that you think you have a deeply held belief that might be challengeable? And also, if not, was there one that you experienced going through yourself in the past that was revelatory?
Great question. Yeah, the thing about doing SE is there have been some major shifts in my own beliefs just by challenging other people and then realizing that if I confronted a bad reason, that I might be using that same bad reason to support one of my beliefs. And so for that reason, I've gone through quite a few shifts in just the past 2 years since I've been practicing SE. And actually, when Anthony came to visit me just 2 weeks ago, I think it was just before coronavirus came in, I asked him the same question. It was really interesting. We both had similar thought process in not really being sure about some of our doubts. I'd say the thing that I've been thinking and putting a lot of consideration into lately is my diet, especially whether it comes to the ethics of involving myself in the consumption of animal products. And I'm not fully like out there in vegan world, but I've certainly questioned like there's this thing called in epistemology called moral epistemology, whether or not we can know how a thing is good or bad, which is where things get really confusing. It's usually like interview 8 or 9 in my interviews with people.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's been something that I've been thinking about and questioning quite a bit for myself.
So this is really interesting because this is something that I'm extremely passionate about. I was vegan for about 6 years and 5.5, and it was something that I held extremely deep beliefs, and actually was something that once I stopped being vegan, made me come to the realization that deeply held beliefs like this are extremely dangerous. So that's something that I feel like is actually a good conversation starter, maybe. But I don't know if we should really get into that right now, just because it's so off the subject. But maybe you and I can have a podcast about that some other time, and we can talk about the moral ethics of it. I've actually been
still
going
through it, so I haven't really landed on any conclusion.
That might be why it'd be good to have the conversation. But I'm actually trying to get a debate on YouTube with someone that is a big vegan activist on the ethics of veganism, because are you guys familiar with Cosmic Skeptic?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to debate him on this, because I think that his reasoning, his ethical reasoning, is fallacious. And I've heard him talk to really smart people, and they have not been able to talk to him about it, because they don't talk to him about it for the people when they talk about oh man, I don't know if I should get on this road, but so just really quickly, I think that the oftentimes when people talk about the ethics of consuming animal products, it's from a very emotional standpoint. And like I said, for me, it was right. So I was vegan for a really long time, and I did it strictly for animal ethics. And I did it to the point where I got extremely sick and malnourished. And I'm pretty knowledgeable about the edge or nutrition. So I was trying to do everything I could to balance it through supplements and things like that. But I ended up just getting extremely sick to the point where I was hospitalized, and I had to eat meat for health reasons. And when I ate meat for the first time, I cried. That's how deeply held these beliefs were. So, yeah, so I don't want to go too far into that. This is definitely a conversation that we should maybe have sometime, but I'd really like to get Alex on a debate, and I don't think he will, because maybe my YouTube numbers aren't up to his satisfaction, but I don't know. I basically told the person that I was trying to link up with to get us to debate each other that I would go vegan if he could convince me that it was more ethical. So, which I really will. I genuinely will. I mean, I've done it before. I know.
Well, you've had 6 years of practice, right?
Yeah, exactly. I know all the recipes. I can, if he can convince me that it's actually a more moral stance, then I'll do it 100%. I'm not afraid. So but I don't know if he's even interested in doing that. So
I'd recommend trying to engage with him on Twitter, because the cool thing about Twitter is anyone can talk to anyone. And so if your approach is something he's never heard before, he may give it some attention.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I don't even have a Twitter. I should really get a Twitter. I'm so like I have like Instagram, Facebook, and then I do the podcast thing, and between those things it's really hard to have my attention go on to Twitter. But that's not a bad idea. I should actually do that, because I feel like that's just like one of those domains that you have to put yourself into. So yeah, that's really cool though.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. I mean, ethics and morals
it's a really tough one.
Yeah, morals and ethics are like the hardest things to sift through. I think it's kind of funny that people even try to put them in a box. So
yeah, that one's intertangled with a lot of different categories beyond just morals.
Change.
It's like the environment, and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, so that's
and also health.
Of course, yeah. So yeah, man, we should talk about that sometime. I don't want to go off on that rabbit trail right now. So for me today, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, for one, free will is one that I'm like pretty
That's
certain.
Another one I brought up with Anthony.
Really? Yeah, I'm pretty certain free will doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And then another one is I take the strong atheist position. Like I don't think that it's even possible that the theistic gods could exist. So those are some of my stronger beliefs. And it's interesting because I've been thinking a lot about that lately. And are you guys atheists? I'm assuming you are, but that's kind of a bad assumption.
I am.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I identify as atheist, yes.
And so would you guys say that you take the strong atheist position, or are you guys still open to seeing evidence to the contrary?
I think for me, maybe I could consider myself a strong atheist before I got into SE, but it was more like I was comfortable saying there is no God, but not necessarily like super actually confident in that, but just feeling comfortable saying it. Now I'm not comfortable saying it because I don't think that it's a burden that I can hold. Like,
Right.
how could I know
Yeah.
there was no God?
So my question with that would be,
Wait, can I take that really quick?
yeah.
Because I have something to say to that one too. Yeah, I think the strongest reason to be low on the scale for a god is also intertwined and entangled with not having any way to doubt it. So if there's nothing that would slide you down the scale, why be at a high number at all? And the same goes for the claim that there's positively no God. And to me, if I were to be high on the scale for the claim that there is positively no God, then I would be at a high number about a claim to which I couldn't possibly doubt. And so I feel like it's going a step further than we need to go. Because all we need to do is just say, I don't have any reason to hold that idea. And that should be enough. And so, yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah. It's interesting. The only reason that I've been thinking about this lately was because, and so it's not like 100% confidence, because 100% confidence in anything is stupid. Not even like scientists take that approach with like any real, like evolution isn't even 100%, but most people would say it's like 99, right? So, so I was talking to someone recently, and he's really smart, and him and I were talking about this, and he was saying that he thinks that the Christian God, there's a possibility for the Christian God. And I was kind of confused because when we talked about it, he said that, well, most Christians don't believe in the Christian God being, like the guy that made the earth 6,000 years ago, and they kind of throw out the flood, and they throw out this, and they don't really believe in a virgin birth, and resurrection might be off the table. But it's like, at that point, like, are we even talking about the Christian God? Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This is just some of my thoughts, and this is because I until that conversation, which was just last week, I would have never taken this position. You know what I mean? I would have always said, no, I don't. I mean, there's still a possibility, I guess. But then after thinking about it, I just don't see how that possibility could coincide with all of our current understanding of the way the universe works. And I think that by saying that it's possible, I'm just lying to myself to make a better conversation happen.
Well, you don't necessarily have to say it's possible. You don't necessarily have to say it's impossible. You can just say you don't know.
Right. You don't know if it's possible.
Yeah.
Because I guess potentially so potentially here's what could make it possible, I suppose, is if somehow God made the universe and made it look exactly like it is now, and all of that thing happened, but he imprinted some kind of weird system in the brain to make it alternative, So I mean, that's like a possibility, right? Or no,
yeah,
maybe that's a possibility. You can't even say that's a possibility, right? Maybe that's a possibility. So
yeah, my internet connection is saying it's unstable, so I apologize if I get a little choppy. But
yeah,
think about it this way: like, if someone said there's this animal in the forest, and let's just call it animal X, and it's like 10 feet tall, and they start describing it, and they say that it can, it can cause trees to fall down with its mind, and there's all these miraculous claims that they say it can do. You
Uh-huh.
can be like pretty confident that that's not the case if they give all these details. But if you start removing the details of their claim, where it's not as specific and extreme, then there's still room to believe that 10-foot animal exists in some way. And so what,
Right.
what I guess what I'm saying is
Deism might be real. Is that what you're saying? Or
I'm sorry, what was that?
are you saying that deism might be real? Because
I'm
I'll
breaking up.
totally acknowledge that. Still breaking up? Sorry.
Maybe the connection's a little shaky. Sorry.
No, it's okay. So I said, are you trying to say that at the core of it, deism is a possibility? Because I will acknowledge that. You know what I mean? Like I'm not the kind of person that would not acknowledge. I mean, deism to me is totally on the table, you know?
Yeah. And like, yeah, that's the other extreme of it, but it could be somewhere in the middle where there is this God that intervened and communicated with humanity, but they got it all wrong, and the story changed over the years, and they made claims about him that's not actually true, that you can verify now that it's not actually true. But that being did actually exist and communicate with humanity.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's fair. Fair enough. So I guess I can flex on this quite a bit, actually. So cool.
So yeah, I guess my point is when someone's making a specific enough claim about a God and how old the earth is and all of the things that come with the religion, don't be too quick to just negate everything and say, okay, I mean, you could technically say that God with all that specifics, I'm fairly confident, positive position doesn't exist. But if it's like, you could be generous in the sense to say, well, maybe I don't believe all of those, really hard to believe positions, and maybe there's room for something else that might have happened.
Yeah. Cool. Any thoughts on that, Nathan?
Yeah. So I've actually been kind of struggling to come to terms with how I process the scale of confidence, because I do it a little differently than other SE reviewers online. To me, the problem of solipsism, which is how could I know I'm not a brain in a vat, is the reason I'm not at 100 about anything and why I'm not at a 0 about anything. And I've actually kind of redefined the scale in my talks, especially my long talks, to have 0 be ignorance of the claim. And like you've just never heard it. Like I say, I own an invisible car, and you're 0 about that until I say it, right? And then, because how could you possibly think about my claim about an invisible car until I say it? And the more details I add, the more unlikely it is that you thought about it in the first place. And then as soon as it enters your mind, the scale of confidence to me is reflecting what your mind is doing. So you're at a 1, which is all questions. To me, most other in SE, usually 0 is all questions. But to me, I think 1 is a little bit more honest, because it's basically saying I could be wrong, that it is true, and I'm thinking it's not true. And so to me, a 1 is the idea entering your mind and only having questions about it. And then the more you process that idea, the higher up you go on the scale, the more confident you think it is the case and factually true. And then when you're at 100, you're closed-minded to being wrong. And so I define 100 as closed-minded confidence. So I try to steer my interlocutor away from either a 0 or a 100 to see if they are somewhere else on that spectrum, to see if there is a way to be more confident in this thing. So if they're at a 99, what would it take for you to be 100? So we can talk about what we would be looking for to even think it's true, right? Even more than we already do. And if they're at a low number, what would it take to doubt it even more? So I don't know. I've been putting a lot of thought into it. I'm not entirely confident about my confidence scale, but those are my thoughts about it.
I actually like that.
Yeah, that is cool. I know that's
Awesome, thank you.
kind of one of those things you know, and a lot of times in conversations that is an interesting part of the dialogue, because a lot of people have, I I mean, personally, I I always find it to be really interesting. Like, I'm just gonna use a kind of a weird example, but so like I'm a woodworker, and so sometimes I'll learn how to do something related to working with wood that I had no idea you could do, but it would be useful to do it every time that I work with wood. You know, like a different method of doing something that makes it a little bit easier to do, or something along those lines. It always blows my mind just how little we know. You know what I mean? And that's something that
Yeah.
I just find to be so. I do a lot of like free courses online and stuff, and it's like weird when you learn something new that is like fundamental in the universe or in your everyday experience, and you have no idea before that moment, and then all of a sudden you just see it everywhere, you know, like the way that photons are produced or something. You're like, holy shit, that is, you know what I mean, energy being released or absorbed by atoms, you know. And so you're just like, that is like this groundbreaking thing, that everything around us is this crazy energy thing, you know. And so as the burners would say, we're light people.
You know, I feel the same way about psychology.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I started studying psychology that I started seeing the way other people came to their conclusions in really interesting ways. And then the more I became kind of like self-critical about my own ideas, because maybe I'm succumbing to the same fallacies, and not even, or fallacies that I'm not aware of. Yeah, so that's really, really cool and interesting. Yeah, and the burner community is a really fun place to explore those things.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah,
Yeah.
another thing that's really interesting, I've recently gotten a lot more into like philosophy, and a, a lot more into like different ethical philosophies and moral philosophies and stuff. And that is also really interesting, because that's like, there's so many trails that you can go down, and it's something that people deal with every day. You know what I mean? Morality is something, knowing or unknowingly, people deal with every day. And most people never even think of like, is morality objective or subjective, or is it this, or is it, you know, and where do we get them from, and how are they developed, and why are they different other places? And so that's like one of those things that lately I've just been like kind of obsessed with. And Sunday I'm
Have you read the
actually
book, The Moral Landscape?
Oh yeah, I have, but I disagree with Sam Harris's premise.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, that's okay. Well, sorry, you were gonna say something. Sunday, what?
Well, maybe if you're interested in the moral landscape, you should tune into the podcast I'm doing Sunday, because I'm interviewing someone named Jesse Prinz, who's a moral philosopher out at I think NYU. And I'm really excited to interview him, because he's like someone who's really influenced my opinion on this. But that's something that you know, just like have you ever read Hume? Either of you?
Yeah, it's been years, but I have. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm familiar, but I can't say that I like read up on it.
Okay, yeah. So Hume, you know, he came up with like the famous, like, you can't the is ought fallacy, and
Right.
and so a lot of like moral philosophers say that's kind of like the thing that debunked Sam Harris's moral philosophy, you know, 300 years ago or
Yeah,
whatever.
but Sam Harris wrote The Moral Landscape way after Hume, right? Isn't Sam Harris like,
Oh yeah,
trying to
Hume is like,
rebut?
yeah. So
Yeah.
I was gonna say, so and actually last week I had on the guy that I was just talking about, that kind of maybe questioned my atheism a little bit. And so him and I were talking about it, and he also kind of has the same premise that Sam Harris does, which is, you know, that morality is objective, and that you know, and I understand, because like the possible worlds scenario is something that's really common in philosophy, but my issue with it is that there's not an infinite amount of possible worlds, right? We only have one that we are experiencing. And so well, yeah, I don't know if this is another rabbit trail, but Sam Harris's whole premise is kind of off of the possible worlds thing. So it's like, you know, and Eddie, have you read The Moral Landscape?
No, but I'm familiar with it. I think
Mhm.
from what I understand, uh, Sam Harris does a pretty good job of laying out like a secular moral landscape, but
Uh-huh.
he jumps a little too far to say that it is actually objective, and fails to just admit that it is a subjective preference that we have
Right.
that starts it all out. I mean, we can objectively identify things that will, bring us closer to a goal or further away from a goal, which, that's talking about the landscape. But the fact that we have a goal it's just subjective. It's not like this uh, objective fact that doesn't take into account our preference, because
Yeah.
that's what
So
subjectivity is.
yeah. So Nathan, earlier you brought up veganism, and this is something that maybe would make you consider this with Sam Harris's argument, because Sam Harris's argument is it's morality is objectively what is good for not having suffering for all humans, I believe. I don't, does he go further to possible creatures, or is it just humans? Do you know? Do you remember? I can't remember. So,
He basically lays out the idea that if you can imagine, if good means anything,
uh-huh.
then it must mean, like you said, like if you can imagine a universe where everything suffers as much as it can for as
Uh-huh.
long as it can before it ultimately perishes, then
Mm-hmm.
that would be a bad universe. Because
Right.
if the word bad means anything at all, then it must apply to that scenario.
Right.
And the opposite must be true for a good universe, right?
Yeah.
And he claims that's all one needs for his foundation for saying that there is objective morality.
Right.
However, he calls it a landscape because, unlike a declaration, morality is more complex than just good, bad.
Right.
It's a landscape. It's a three-dimensional
Three-dimensional space. Yeah.
game of chess, right? So what is good for some people and some groups and some organisms may be very bad for others. However, I think what would be addressed in either veganism or vegetarianism is taking into consideration the quality of consciousness. And now this is where it gets really confusing because, and this is where I'm currently at with my thought process on not just veganism, it'd be vegetarianism, I suppose, or any kind of, because like you can make a case that maybe vegetarianism would be better,
or pescatarianism, or
yeah. The thought process though is like we can demonstrate in a laboratory that the same kind of phenomenon in a fruit fly's brain, which looks just like chronic pain, can exist in a fruit fly, right? So what looks like chronic pain in our brains can be recognized in a fruit fly. So we have reason to believe a fruit fly can feel chronic pain. And if that's the case, is the quality of that pain equal or greater or lesser than anything else with a larger brain? And does that enter in an understanding of quality of consciousness? And so, but we don't really understand consciousness, right? So we can't really make a strong case one way or the other necessarily, but that would be kind of what I think people would be, if they were to merge those two worlds of Sam Harris's moral landscape and trying to come to terms with vegetarianism.
yeah, I think it's
that's kind
interesting
of
that
where those
Sam Harris
intersect.
is a determinist, yet he believes in objective morality. It seems to be kind of contradictory to me, but
Interesting. Why would that be? Why
Because
can't those both exist?
I mean, uh, be, I just think that when you think of objective morals, it means that anything, anywhere could come to the same conclusion of wrongness or rightness, right? Um,
Uh, yeah. I suppose. Well, if in a, can you say it again? I don't know if I really understood that.
so if objective morals exist, anything
Uh-huh.
can come to the conclusion of wrongness or rightness. Anything. So objectivity means that it exists no matter what. I mean, objective morality would mean that it exists outside of humanity. Objective morality would mean that it exists outside of animals. So what happens if
Mm,
there is no humans or animals?
Mm.
I see.
I think, yeah, it'd be really useful to like kind of nail down what we mean by objective and subjective, because my understanding of objective and subjective is that uh, subjective means that it's determined by the subject,
Yeah.
not that it's like determined or random or anything. That doesn't matter.
No.
The
I sorry,
yeah,
I might have confused you. What
yeah.
I'm trying to say is that if something is objectively moral, then um, anybody can come to the conclusion that that thing is wrong, right? So if I think that murder is bad, this is obviously the most basic thing, right? If I
Mm.
think that murder is bad, and that's objectively bad, if murder is objectively wrong, then anything in the universe, or any living thing, I guess, because bad, this is where I don't really understand how it can be objective, because outside of conscious beings, right and wrong don't really exist, right?
Hmm.
But
I have a question.
yeah.
Okay. Um, do you understand objectivity to mean, like, let's say everyone agreed that the Earth was 13.4 billion years old? I'm sorry, not the Earth, the universe. Is that is that what makes it objective, that everyone
No,
agreed?
no.
Okay.
Objective would mean that there's a way that it's factually found. So everybody agreeing would be irrelevant, because if it's objectively true, and people can agree on objectively false things. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
So
So
I guess my next question would be, can something be objectively true and unable to be found by subjects?
sure.
Okay. So if
I would like, for
if something
example,
is objectively, can something be objectively morally or objectively wrong, but no one has discovered it yet? Like, is that,
in my opinion,
yeah?
well, I don't think that anything can be objectively wrong, because I don't believe in objective morality.
Yeah, but like when you were talking about Sam Harris, and I remember you saying that determinism and objectivity can't.
I'm saying that I find it to be interesting that he's a determinist. He doesn't believe in free will.
Right.
So the reason why I think that's interesting is because I mean, maybe that's kind of a weird line to draw, but I'm just thinking that he believes that everything is determined, essentially.
Mhm.
And so people murdering people is wrong, but it's outside of their control in a way. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it is like, it's hard to explain. Like, free will
Okay.
is a whole complex thing, but it's like, is it really wrong if they were predisposed to do it? Do you?
Yeah. So,
Okay,
like,
I
for
think I know.
example, like if a brick fell and killed a brick fell off of a roof and
Right.
killed someone, a
Would
really
that be
tall
murder?
building, um, you wouldn't say
That's
it's
bad.
the brick's fault,
Exactly.
but you would still hold the brick as the reason why.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so, in my view, humans are bricks. I don't
Yeah.
really think that we're any different than bricks. I think that we have come to this idea that we are special because we have a conscious experience, but at the end of the day, we're still just a collection of atoms that are conscious and self-aware. So we're bricks in a, in a weird way. Do you know what I'm saying?
So then to expand on the analogy, it would be like if there was this machine or this mechanism that was consistently throwing off bricks and killing people, we wouldn't say that machine is at fault because
It's not evil. It's not an evil machine. It's just a machine that's faulty, maybe.
But we would still work to shut down that machine. Or
correct.
We would may not hold.
Yeah, because our subjectivity would declare that is not good for whatever humanity or whatever it's taken out.
Yeah. So I think if I were to play devil's advocate, I think Sam might take that position where it's like it's determined, but you're still the thing that is causing this issue. So what can we do to change it? Should we lock you up? Can we deter you? Et cetera, et cetera. Even if it's all determined, because you're just trying.
Yeah, but I don't know if that necessarily has any relation to whether or not it's objectively morally wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like, I agree with Sam in that case. Like, I still want to hold people accountable and have a justice system and things like that.
Yeah.
But I just can't say that I mean, I have thought pretty deeply about this, and I can't come to that conclusion. And I have, a lot of friends that believe in objective morality, and obviously Sam Harris does. And I love Sam Harris and I understand his premise pretty well, but I just don't agree with it. So
I've got a couple questions. If can somebody be, I think you and I would probably agree, but I'll ask it as a question anyway. Can somebody be really certain of something about a factual claim and still be mistaken about it?
Absolutely.
Okay. And can a person think some action they're taking is not causing suffering, but that action is causing suffering?
Absolutely.
Okay. In Sam Harris's understanding, he would say the only thing he needs for objective morality is a universe in which everything suffers as much as it can for as long as it can, right?
Yeah.
So if that's and if that's the foundation, would you say that there are some ways to move about throughout life that would lead towards a greater net suffering, and some ways that would lead to a greater net positive?
So once we set up those parameters, it becomes objective, but it's still parameters that we establish, which makes it subjective. You know what I'm saying? So we are saying that that's the rules. It's like chess, or you said chess earlier, or it's like any
in the same way that facts are facts, right?
I don't think so. So I think that if
are there facts?
Yes, but I don't think that you set up rules for the facts to exist. So like if you drop a water bottle in a unobstructed space, then it's always going to fall at the same speed, which is the law of gravity, I guess. So what is it, 9.8 per seconds squared or whatever? Feet per second squared. So that rule is going to be the same regardless of you and I coming up with it.
Okay, sorry, can I interrupt?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the thing about subjectivity is that it can also be a fact. So like, it's a fact that you like chocolate ice cream. It's a fact that you like pizza. It's a fact that you prefer to live rather than die. And so in that way, it's factually true, but subjectivity doesn't mean it is not factual. What it means is it's determined, the truthfulness of it is determined by the subject.
Right.
So
I agree with you.
Whether it's chocolate, whether you like chocolate or like vanilla, is determined by the subject that you're asking the question to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah. So if I say chocolate is good, well, that is a fact for me, which
No.
makes it subjective.
It's a fact that
When I say, no, I didn't say I like chocolate. I said chocolate is good. So that is a fact for me, but it might not be a fact for you. Okay. So if I say murder is good or murder is bad, then that is a fact for me. But if you're Dahmer, you might disagree with me.
I don't know if I understand what it means. It's a fact for me, because it depends really what you mean by good.
Right. So, well, we can just use Sam Harris's wording. I mean, so if I choose those parameters, you know, good is everybody not suffering. That's good, right? Yeah. Well, then, I mean, I can look at the world and determine whether or not something is moral, but who am I to come up with those rules? I guess at the end of the day, those are just rules that I'm making. And if I say rape is bad, well, is it bad for a zebra or a lion or something? Well, that's like a whole different thing. You know what I mean? And maybe 10,000 years ago, it might have been different for humans, I guess. And so I don't know. I just think that I don't see how I think that we can come to an understanding based on arbitrary rules that we determine, but I don't see how they can be objectively true, which would mean that they're found universally among everybody.
Yeah, I think the way that Matt Dillahunty describes it is, once we agree on the goal,
yeah,
what well-being or is what he talks about, then you can objectively assess.
Totally, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, Nathan. I kind of derailed what you were.
Oh no, that was great. No, yeah, because once we agree what the goal is, and I think to tie what Matt Dillahunty says into what Sam Harris is saying, the goal would be the avoidance of suffering and the promotion of well-being. And if that is the goal, then wouldn't there be right and wrong ways to do things?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Objectively. Yeah.
So objectively, and
so it's kind of like this, like it's like a weird thing though, because it's not truly objectively true, right? I mean, I guess we're coming up with
that's why it's a landscape, because what's bad for some may be good for others, and vice versa, and it's more than just black and white.
I agree. And so that is the whole like philosophy of the many worlds philosophy. If you are able to construct an infinite amount of worlds where people can like, if everybody constructed their own world of what is good and bad for them, then we could determine, like, if you were to say like everybody determines like what's good and bad for them, and that's objectively good and bad for them, then objective morals exist because there's all of these infinite possibilities. But the truth is that there's not an infinite amount of worlds that we know of anyways. And I just think that the rules are, at the end of the day, they're arbitrarily set by humans. We're all agreeing on them for whatever reason serves our purpose. Like in Afghanistan, or maybe not Afghanistan, but in Saudi Arabia, burqas are really cool. And they might all subjectively set the parameters for that to be morally good, but I disagree. And we can say from our perspective that that isn't good for human flourishing, because it holds back women or whatever you want to say. But
we can be mistaken about what's good and bad, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe they are mistaken, but maybe we are too.
Or we could be mistaken too. Yeah.
So this is complex. I this is why I love moral philosophy, but it's super complex. So I'm not like ready to die on any hill with this. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. I recommend checking out Reed from Cordial Curiosity has a new video with Peter Boghossian, who wrote the book Manual for Creating Atheists, and also the book How to Have Impossible Conversations.
Yeah, I just read
both
that
of which
yesterday,
I highly recommend to anybody watching this right now. Totally check out those two books, especially How to Have Impossible Conversations. That one is, I love that one.
I just read that one yesterday. I read the other one a long time ago, and I just read How to Have Impossible Conversations yesterday, and it was
great.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah.
Well, I listened to it on Audible, but.
And they had Reed had a great conversation with Peter about moral epistemology and whether or not it can be a tool to figure out things that are moral. And I happen to think that it's probably the only thing that a secular community can really grasp onto to make a case for morality in general. And so there may be something else. It's the only thing that's come across my path that has convinced me, however, that morality can be determined without appealing to any kind of God or gods or any kind of dogma or belief system, really, that we can talk about the right ways to move towards our goals to accomplish the best well-being for everybody objectively. And if it's not objective and it's only subjective, that's a possibility. But to me, in my mind, the subjective bubble that we've been talking about here exists within a greater objective bubble. And if somebody's blind over there, that's a subjective experience for them. But that's also an objective observation about their subjective experience. So to me, subjectivity exists within the objectivity we've been talking about this whole time.
Have you guys ever heard of the guy? He is a YouTuber. He's not really posting anymore. His name is Theoretical Bullshit.
Negative.
I haven't seen that.
Okay. He's one of my favorite YouTubers. Him and Matt Dillahunty are big influences of mine, and I think he does a really good job of breaking down morality. It has a lot of similarities with the moral landscape, and it was posted about 3 months before Sam put his book out. But you think that he would be influenced by him. But if you just look up a treatise on morality, or just look up theoretical BS, his content is really, really good. And another reason why I usually get on Twitter is because I ended up just having a conversation with him. This is someone that I look up to, and I was like, wow, this guy's got a lot of good stuff. And years later, I got on Twitter and I just started talking with him. Wow, freaking Twitter's awesome. So I recommend that. Another thing I wanted to say was there was a debate between Sam Harris and William Lane Craig, in which they talk about the foundation of what Sam Harris would talk about well-being. And William Lane Craig would always say, well, why is well-being important? And trying to kind of nail down that it's ultimately subjective, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it always bugged me that Sam never just answered because creatures that didn't care about well-being didn't survive.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
And he just never wanted to go there, and I don't know why. But
so this is just kind of a weird question, but do you think that fear is an objective thing? Is fear objective? Would you say that fear is something that can be objectively measured?
Well, I don't know about Eddie, but I would personally go even further and say all subjective descriptions like that exist within the objective world, even though it's in my brain, and my brain follows the laws of physics, right? Mm-hmm. And we use these words to describe our experiences, but our experiences are contingent on the external world. And if you alter my brain or remove something from my brain, it changes my internal experience, which then changes how I would use these words to describe things.
Yeah. So I'm going to make a recommendation.
I don't know if that answered your question,
but yeah. I mean, it does. I'd like to recommend 2 books. Are you a reader? Sounds like you are.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Well, you got a lot of downtime.
Yeah. I'm in quarantine, so let's do it.
Yeah. So let me get the titles though, just because I tend to read too much, and so I forget the name of the books that I just read. So one is The Atheist Guide to Reality by Alex Rosenberg. Have you ever heard about Alex Rosenberg?
I've heard of him. I don't believe I've read his books yet.
Yeah,
but it's called what is it called again? I'm writing it down.
The Atheist Guide to Reality. And I don't know, Eddie, did we lose you? Because I don't see your face. Oh no, you're still there. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think I dropped and then reconnected.
Okay. And then the other book that I was going to recommend, this is actually this one's a little bit more difficult to find. Sorry. And it's only a paperback. It's called The Conscious Brain: How Attention Endangers Experience. And that's by Jesse Prince, who I'm having on the podcast on Sunday. So this is a lot of stuff that we talked about in this domain. And I'll definitely be bringing that up with him on Sunday if you're interested in tuning in, because he's really, really, like, he's really, I really appreciate his opinion. It's really good. So, yeah. So, cool. Yeah, man. Do you guys have anything that you want to ask me or say or anything before we, well, why don't you guys talk about your YouTube channels and stuff, and that way we can at least get you guys some followers out of this.
Okay. Nathan, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I've only got like maybe 5 videos up, but each one's pretty long. And a lot of editing goes into each one. I try to put graphics up on the screen to kind of visualize what my thought process is like while I'm asking my questions. And the name of the channel is Abstract Activist SE. Yeah, I think that's it. Check me out. If you type in the fastest way to find me, the fastest way to find me is to type in how to instill doubt into YouTube, and it'll bring up one of my more popular videos where I instill doubt in someone's idea by explaining how they can instill doubt in someone else's idea. And then it all comes around full circle at the end of the video. So yeah.
Yeah, I checked out your YouTube today and I was like, holy shit, that must have taken a lot of editing.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. So go ahead, Eddie.
My YouTube channel is called Deep Discussions. And my Twitter handle, which is where I'm more active, is Deep Discussion 1. I tend to be a little myself on Twitter. It used to be all about SE, and then I felt like it was a little restricted, and so I just opened it up as, I just call myself Spaghetti Eddie because that's my nickname, and I'll post my SE content there as well as engage with like apologists and stuff like that. But all of my SE content is on Deep Discussions. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I see that. I've watched your videos in the past, so I was just like, I just looked you up. That's just kind of funny because before today I didn't know, Anthony linked us, so I didn't know you aside from Anthony linking us. So, yeah. But now I know that I've watched your videos and stuff. That's cool.
You're like that guy.
Yeah. So yeah. Cool. Well, guys, it's been awesome. I really appreciate you joining me, and
I had a lot of fun today.
Yeah, cool. I'm going to stop the live stream really fast and stop the